turn
I'm ready.
Don, you ready?
I'm ready. I've been ready all my life.
Okay, great.
Not really, but...
Give me 1 second.
Giving you a second.
And when you're ready.
We're here at Jazz Live San Diego with Don Menza. Don, welcome to Jazz Live San Diego.
It's good to be here. Thank you. I'm glad I made it.
So tell us a little bit about the band that you've got playing with you tonight.
Well, Dick Weller, and I've known in the last few years. He was a choice of Don Rader's, who's not here yet. So I hope he's okay. Anyway, I've played a few gigs with him. He's a wonderful player. Tom Rader, I've known for many, many years, and we've shared the bandstand many, many times, and he's an incredible player, incredible talent. Chris Connor, I know from Toronto and from the Buffalo area. I'm from Buffalo, and wonderful bass player. You know, I enjoy playing with these guys. They make it easy for me. Anything that I can't do, they cover me.
You mentioned the trumpeter Don Rader. Don's someone that you've played with for a very long time.
Well, let's say 50 years.
That's a very long time.
It's a real long time. You wait. Pretty soon you're going to be able to look back that far.
So when did you meet Don?
Well, I met Don in 1959. I was playing with the Alboleto Sextet, and we were in Dayton, Ohio, and Jimmy Smith, the organ player Jimmy Smith, had a gig, and it was a late night gig, and he was having a session after the gig, and I went down there to play. And I was on the bandstand, and all of a sudden I saw all these musicians filing in with cases and everything. And Woody Herman's band was in Dayton that night, and they all came down and played, and Don Rader and I hooked up, and there were a bunch of people that I remember from that time. A great tenor player, Bo Boyd from Houston, I believe. And I don't know if Don's from California or from Texas. It seems to escape me at the moment.
So you mentioned that you grew up in Buffalo,
Yeah.
and how did you get introduced to music?
I'm Sicilian, you know, and in your house, everybody sang or played guitar. I didn't sing. Well, in the beginning, I was a singer, and then I saw an alto saxophone, and it was so pretty, and I tried to play it, and very soon I found out how difficult it was. And then I started going around to, and of course, all the weddings, they always had a quintet or a sextet with people playing. And I remember seeing somebody play the tenor saxophone. And I got one in 8th grade, not in 8th grade, in 7th grade, in public school number 1 in Buffalo. And I remember going in, and they had somebody that came around all those years just wanting, okay, what instrument do you want to play? I said, I want to play the trumpet. And the man, I remember his name, Sid DiAugustino, he said, we're all out of trumpets, here's a clarinet. Same thing. I found out very soon how difficult that was to play. And then I talked my mother into renting a tenor saxophone for me, $3 a month. And in those years, it was a lot of money. And I fell in love with the saxophone. And then I heard somebody play, and it was Coleman Hawkins, you know, a record. And I said, oh my God, isn't that beautiful?
And that's how you started kind of a love affair with jazz.
Well, my mother thought it was going to be just a passing fancy, you know. He'll get over it. Don't worry. And I remember all my uncles were. I have an uncle that's a doctor. They were engineers. They were, you know, all very technical orientated. And my mother had a party, and they all took me in the backyard. They said, look, the saxophone's okay. You can play weddings and Irish funerals or whatever. I said, but you got to get a real job. And I said, well, you know, I really like the saxophone. And my mother said, Don, you don't want to do this, the saxophone. You're going to play in smoke-filled nightclubs with alcohol and prostitutes and dope. And I said, really?
Wait, and that's when you fell in love.
That's it.
That's when you fell in love with jazz and started playing. Well, one of the first big gigs and jobs that you had was with Maynard Ferguson in 1962. What led up to you being called by Maynard?
Maynard was looking for a tenor player, and I went to New York. This was 1960, and I went to New York to try out for the band, and there was a great tenor player from Little Rock, Arkansas. His name was Lynn Halliday, and he played wonderful. I mean, he played like young Sonny Rollins. And in those days, I was trying to do that as well. And Maynard had a hard time deciding which one. And then I remember I was staying with Don Ellison in those days in New York. And Maynard called and he said, look, I made up my mind. He said, I really like the way you play. He said, but I'm going to go with Lynn. And I was crushed. I went back to Buffalo and I said, well, you know, that'll never happen again. And I really started to practice. And about 8 months later, I was in Denver, Colorado with the Albalado Sextet. And the phone rang and it was, hello, Don? I said, yeah, this is Flo. I said, Flo who? She said, Flo Ferguson. Maynard wants you to come on the band. I said, I can't. I'm going back to school. And I turned it down. And then in the spring of 1961, 2 weeks before my final exams at the State University of New York in Fredonia, I got a call from Maynard again. He said, listen, we open in Birdland in 4 days. Can you be here? And I thought about it, and I said, what am I doing here, learning to be a teacher? I want to be a jazz saxophone player. I want to play in all those places. I said, I'll be there. Next day I was in Birdland.
Excellent. You also spent some time in Germany in the 60s, too, or in Europe.
I was in the Army in 1955, 6, and 7. In 56 and 57, I was stationed in Frankfurt, and there was a jazz orchestra with Cedar Walton, Leo Wright, Lanny Morgan, Don Ellis, Eddie Harris. I mean, names of some
This
sort.
was a military band?
A military jazz orchestra.
Right.
And I got to know a lot of people in Europe, and then I came back to the States, and in the spring of 62, after Maynard's band, let's see, the spring of 63, spring of 64, I got a call from somebody in Munich, said, Max Greger's looking for a tenor player. And I said, okay, and I put a bunch of records together and tapes and pictures and bio and sent it to him. And the day he got it, he called me and I said, when do you need me? And this was February 15th. He said, I need you here 1st of March. I sold everything. My wife was already 2 months pregnant. We flew to Munich, and I stayed there 4 years.
Wow, that was a nice long time to be there.
Oh, it was beautiful. And I go back all the time. I just got back. I'm still recovering from jet lag a month later.
And so you came back to the States and recorded what is in, kind of the canons of jazz, one of the classic recordings with Buddy Rich and his orchestra, the Channel One Suite. And that's, I'm sure, something you've been asked about many, many times, the solo work on that, and circular breathing, the technique you used during that.
All the oboe players know how to do that. Bassoon players, that's a... Anyway, it's funny. We recorded that live for Pacific Jazz for Dick Bach in the studio. And it was just a short cadenza, and that was it. And then we started going on the road, and I remember Buddy saying, hey man, stretch out, play it long. So I started doing the circular breathing. And Buddy freaked out. He said, man, take as long as you want, do it. That's, and he used to sit back there with his feet up on the drums and look at me play and shake his head. And one night in Buffalo, it was on my birthday too, it was April 22nd, 1968, at Kleinan's Music Hall. And Buddy on the bandstand went out there and started like lighting a cigarette, and it fell. He said, "Oh, that's one of those Don Menza roll your own." I said, "Buddy, this is my home." And he said, "Man, why didn't you play the solo that way on the record?" And I said, "Well, why don't we do it live now, on the bandstand?" And Pat LaBarber will verify that. And he said, why don't you do it live? He said, why don't you get your own band? And the next day he got on the bus and told everybody, get your act together. We're going to do the album live at Caesar's Palace. And that's how that album happened.
That's how that happened. Well, great. Thank you for sharing that story. Another one of the artists that you spent a lot of time with was Louis Bellson as his saxophonist and arranger. And tell us a little bit about your time with Louis.
Well, you know, the arranging thing, this is something that I'm really proud about, is that with Maynard I wrote a lot of charts, with Buddy I wrote a lot of charts, and with Louis, and it seemed like I always, well, except for Maynard, but for Buddy and Louis, I mean, how much better can you get, you know? I was fortunate. I had a chance to like write whatever I wanted. They never told me I need a chart on this or that. They were all original, all my original charts, and yeah, Louis was great. He was really easy. It was a lot easier personally than Buddy, but Buddy was the master.
Yeah, you've and I'll point some people to some of the things that you've said about Buddy, but you seem to really have a great respect for Buddy as a band leader. And
there wasn't anything that he couldn't do. There wasn't anything he couldn't do. And I love Louis. You know, it was, you know, God rest his soul, but Buddy was it was just incredible. Sometimes it sounded like two drummers back there.
Well, I also wanted to touch on the fact that you grew up and you were, you know, big part of being in New York, but you came to Los Angeles and you've spent many, many years.
I grew up in Buffalo.
Right.
I spent a very short time in New York in the general scheme of things.
I was saying New York as the New York State in the East Coast area, but I know they're very different. Different places.
Oh yes.
What prompted you to come to L.A., Southern California?
You know, I'm not so sure. L.A. has been or was very, very good to me. I mean, I was very successful there. I have no regrets about moving there. But as I look back at it, I'm sorry I didn't stay in Europe. Or on the way back, I should have planted my feet firmly in New York, because that's the kind of player I am. That's the kind of music that I grew up on. And when I got here, everybody looked at me, and I remember one of the great lines from Bob Brookmeyer. He said, "Do you always have to play like it's Saturday night?" And I told him, I said, "Yes, because that's all there was Saturday night in Buffalo."
Well, can you give us just an idea of what you're working on now? What are some of the things?
Well, I'm thinking about. I'd like to. I've never really recorded a string album, and I'd like to do that. I have a whole bunch of beautiful ballads that I wrote, and I'd like to do a couple of unknown Mancini tunes, having worked with him for 27 years. And there's a Christmas album that I'd like to finish for a wonderful singer in Austria. She's just incredible. We've already done a couple concerts. She's just a great singer, and I really enjoy working with her. It's easy. I just write things out for her, and she sings it. You know, no, it has to be. You know, she's got the sixth sense. She's really good. She lives in Bad Gleichenberg, somewhere in the south of Austria, southwest of Graz in Austria. And I spent a winter back there teaching, and I love it there. They gave me a house to live in.
Well,
I'm going to run for mayor next year.
Excellent. So,
the Bürgermeister.
Can you tell folks your website, a place where people can find out more information about you?
I don't have a website.
No website?
No, but if you want to look up Don Menza on YouTube, you'll find me. No, I don't have a website. You know what? I'm not into all that. I have a computer. I write my music with the computer now because my hands are getting old, and holding a pencil for more than 10 minutes, they lock up. But no, it's what it is.
Excellent. Well, it's such an honor to have you here at Jazz Live.
No, I hope tonight can be. I can say it was really an honor being here.
Well, and it's an honor to have you. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, Don, I'm just going to get a quick idea.